I think having like compassion for all the stages that we go through physically as women and all the stages we go through as parents. I think, there's a chunk of time, depending on where it falls in your sort of age. There's some difficult things that we as human beings, but specifically as women have to navigate. But, as any artist, you're constantly like, am I doing this properly? Am I doing everything that I could? Do people even give a shit about what I'm creating?
Hey there, it's Ginny.
And I'm Monica.
And this is Hitting Her Mark,
a podcast for women in the arts, actors, filmmakers, artists who are passionately chasing their creative dreams,
while juggling the beautiful chaos of caring for those they love.
We're here to share stories, insights, and inspiration, proving that you can hit your mark without compromising what matters most.
So if you're ready to make your creative dreams a reality, let's dive in.
Kate Fenton is a Canadian producer, actor, writer, and director passionate about storytelling and championing women in leadership. She holds an MFA in acting for York University and completed multiple industry programs, including the NSI Business of Producing. Kate manages a diverse slate from short-form comedy to feature drama, with credits including the CSA-winning digital series Band Ladies and Rainbow Baby, CBC's Canadian Reflections. She has secured funding, led production, and worked with companies like Vortex, Cream Productions, and Hero Entertainment. Her short, Greta's Eddie, earned recognition at the LA Experimental Forum. Kate is currently a production executive at Vortex.
Kate, thank you so much for joining us here at Hitting Her Mark. You have a big resume.
An eclectic background, one might say.
Yes, absolutely. Well, we always like to start with you letting us know how this creative journey came to be. I mean, you're a writer, you're in the theater world, you're are an actor, you're a producer, all the things. You direct as well. So tell us where that all began.
Oh God. It's so funny because I've been listening to your podcast, so it's hilarious to anticipate an interview and be like, what the hell am I going to talk about? Because this bizarre memory came to me. I was listening to the Kim episode, which actually was quite inspiring for self-tapes, which I hate. And so it was fun to listen to her take on it. But it made me think of this movie that I made when I was 10 years old as a way of not having to write like an assignment. Instead, I made this film about Marilyn Monroe. And I played all these different parts and cast this friend of mine as Marilyn, who was this like little Italian girl. And we sort of like transformed her so that it sort of went from like her Norma Jean days into her Marilyn transformation. And then this other girl in her class who had really short hair, I had her play JFK. And we did this whole thing where she was like living in this house with her mom and she went off to become an actress. And then she was living in this grand house and was visiting John F. Kennedy, who rejects her. And then she took a bunch of pills in the bathroom and then we had a whole funeral. Like it was so crazy.
We're a 10-year-old too.
I did the full thing. I shot the thing. I produced the whole thing. I wrote the thing. We sang a song. Like it was crazy. And I remember my teacher just being sort of like blown away by this. Yeah. And it was kind of like, I was just avoiding having to do homework was my logic. And then I kind of forgot about that. And I just recently started thinking about like, yeah, that is basically who I am now. It's that person,
10-year-old girl.
Trying to do all the things and trying to sort of make it all work. Yeah, it's very funny. But I guess it started somewhere in my childhood. And my parents, funnily enough, were both actors. They met in the theater world and very quickly quit. I mean, my dad sort of stuck it out for as long as he could, but they divorced when I was young. And so it was I kind of grew up thinking it was like an impossible career because it was so financially difficult, and their marriage did not withstand it. And my mother had to sort of shift her career constantly. So it was always sort of one of those things that I was like, I'm born to do this thing, but I don't know how to do this, and I don't have any evidence that it's really viable. But then that being said, like I did live in amongst many theater people specifically, was on set with my dad occasionally, and so I was still sort of like inside of it, but always kind of believed it was too difficult to do. And then somewhere there was a shift where I kind of felt like a determination to kind of figure it out. And I think that's why I've become kind of a Swiss Army knife, where I'm like, whatever it is, I will figure out how to do anything to be able to kind of stay inside the world, which is, like a blessing and a curse too.
Yeah. And it's so interesting because so many of us grow up without having any experience, without having any and parents that just like have no idea what is happening here. But you grew up with two, but because they weren't able to make it work, that just
It
I don't know
clouds
what makes
your
sense.
experience. Yeah. No, I think so, because I think there's a certain kind of like blind ignorance that keeps you going. If you don't know, then you did.
Delusion.
Yeah.
Yes,
And,
that's
and
Nice. The
true.
trend, eh, Jenny? Almost every artist that we've had here have been like, you have to be slightly delusional.
You do.
Yeah.
And to keep doing it, like you have to have a belief in yourself that makes zero sense. And that 90% of the time the world is telling you you're wrong and you're crazy. And you have to just be like, well, I don't know. There's nothing else I want to do. So I'm just going to keep going. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And so I noticed that you went to the Etobicoke School of the Arts.
I went to the Etobicoke School of the Arts. I've also had this like bizarre experience of being surrounded by very, very successful people for all of my life, broken social scene. It was witnessing like Kevin Drew just randomly playing the piano in the auditorium when he was like 15.
Wow. Right.
Yeah, or
Yeah.
admiring Emily Haynes. Um, yeah, like all those guys, like Philip Riccio and Aaron Poole and Carly Street, like tons of people who have come out of school and have continued to work. Zoe Doyle, like there's just so many. And I didn't know what I wanted. Like I wanted to be an actor, but I wasn't certain that I could do it. And I wanted to teach and I wanted to produce. And even when I was in high school, I was like directing seniors in plays and producing one act shows and like doing all kinds of things. So I was always sort of doing everything, but not really succeeding in one area. Like I wasn't the lead in all of the high school plays. Like Robin Dunn was there when we were there. And he was kind of like the it guy the whole time we were in school.
Well,
I
what
wasn't.
a group
It was
you were
bizarre.
part of. Like everybody was there at the same time.
Yeah, it's crazy. And so then when I graduated, I went to York University thinking like I'll do a general thing and then I'll try to decide if I'm going into production or if I'm going into acting. And even when I got into the acting stream, I still had the production side saying like, don't waste your time doing that. Come over here. There's so much more that you can do career wise, and you can learn about design and you can direct and you can run a theater company. And so I was constantly cold, and I didn't finish my acting degree and I didn't finish my production degree. And I left the university to go do a clown workshop and like nothing that makes any sense. And I did go to England for a summer and, spent some time at RADA because I wanted so desperately to go to school in England and study Shakespeare.
What
So
was
yeah,
that experience like studying in England?
it's
Like, why did it
crazy.
differ for? Yeah.
It was amazing. I mean, there's some of the most incredible teachers ever. And that was another crazy thing. Like Saving Private Ryan was being shot at the same time, and Jessica Spielberg was in my class.
Wow.
Like, I just feel like I've constantly been like,
You just have all these stars orbiting you all the time.
and I'm like, am I successful? I don't feel successful.
Compared to that, I mean, I'm sure you're just all part of it.
It's very bizarre.
You're in the room. You're in the room. Yeah.
That's it. Like
Yeah.
all you can do is go through the doors that are available to you and just kind of take it all in. But yeah, so that was an amazing experience because there were incredible like directors and teachers. One of our um, voice teachers. She was one of the first Blanches to work with Tennessee Williams in New York. And so you just like get to spend, an hour a week with these people. It was kind of amazing. And then we also, like moved around like animals in a random park. And you're just like, I'm in London, England, and I am excited right now in the forest. I don't know what's happening.
Sure, just all that really classical actor stuff
Yeah.
that people that aren't in it question, like, is that real?
I was just
What?
thinking of my immigrant parents watching me do that and be like, you paid money for this?
Like, and a lot of money. Like, I remember it being such a big deal because, like, we're all moms and we're talking about how do you make this work while you're also a parent. And my mom was a single mom who didn't. I mean, she got into the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts and Bristol Vic at a time when, like, Kenneth Branagh would have been in her class. But my grandmother got really sick and she never went. And so she had, like, carried that too. So as soon as I was interested, then she was like, I'm all for it. We're just gonna like find all the change in the couches and we're gonna, put it on the credit card and we're like sending you to England. So it was a big deal. And even that audition process was crazy. Like we went to New York and I auditioned in the UN building. Like
Wow.
I've never been so terrified in my whole entire life. It's cool. That's the greatest thing about what we do is it's so bizarre that you can randomly be in, different countries. Like Jessica is, dear to my heart at Hero Artists and like picked me up and took me to Italy and I had this unbelievable experience. So it can be the greatest thing and it can be the worst thing sort of simultaneously.
Yeah, well, we definitely want to get into Juliet and Romeo, but before we get there, because
There's a lot.
you have so much. Yeah, you have so much that we want to touch on. I know Monica wanted to delve into more of the theater stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Kind of did. And then you moved into TV film, or did you do that simultaneously as well?
It's a terrible story I'll tell, but when I first started to pursue agents, this total jerk at agency said to me, well, you're not really pretty enough to do film and TV. You should just pursue theater. And then when you're in your 30s and you can do moms, you should come back. And I was like 18 and I left thinking like, that's terrible. He's a horrible person. I'm never going to listen to this. And that is entirely what I did. For auditioned for film and TV. I never considered it as even an option for myself. And I just hit theater really hard. And
It's so, I mean, I love theater and I think theater's a great way, a great avenue. But for someone to say that to someone so young and impressionable, just entering the industry, it's infuriating
it's
to me.
infuriating. And it's insane because it is a difficult industry to break into. And if you do start in your 30s, it's really hard. You're competing against people who have 18 years of
Yes.
experience, if not 25 or longer. So the reality is like, if you don't get in when you're young, it's really hard to work. And I've had definitely like ups and downs and I like held on to I was equity forever, so I could have immediately been actor, but I held on to my non-union for as long as I could so that I could get as much time in front of the camera as possible before I finally was like threatened by ACTRA, like we're going to take all your money 100% if you don't become a union member. But those things, it's hard. And so yeah, I went theater.
You're like in good company because I think Meryl Streep was told the same thing, that
Yeah,
she
well,
was like not
I
pretty
know
enough
Meryl.
and she was never going to make.
I love to compare myself to her, but I don't think so.
So, Kate, is this in 2007-ish? Like this is when you co-founded the Quickening Theatre? Is that where it started for you? Or like, did you work your way up to that?
Yeah, like first I kind of I was always sort of on this track of like, am I going to go into leadership of some kind in education and outdoor education? Because I'd been like a camper and done those things for a million years. And there was even a time when I thought maybe I would amalgamate them and do some sort of like theater and outdoor education. So I was sort of like going back and forth, kind of going back to university and studying, like I studied kinesiology for a time. And then I ended up finishing my theater degree. And in that time, I'd worked on a couple of different shows, a lot of like children's theater stuff, because I had friends from ESA who were running a theater company on the island. So I was kind of occasionally dipping into that and then going back and finishing school. And I went to Vancouver to do the Voice Intensive, which is the Shakespeare voice program that David Smuckler had created. And it originally was at UBC for a decade or something. And then they moved it to Toronto, and they since have kind of ended it because he's in his 80s and can't really run it anymore. But it was a big program, and there I met my husband, and both of us were going back. I was going back to York, and he was coming to Canada to go to York to do our MFAs. And so that is like 2003 that I was like, okay, I'm doing it. I've like gone all over the place. I've taken a couple different degrees. I've worked at a couple different jobs, and I can't stop coming back to theater. So I'm just going to give in. And at least I'll have a degree where I can teach so that when it's not working, I have something, but it's still like in the universe. And so we did that for 2 years. And out of school, we immediately worked for a couple of theater companies that were all Shakespeare based. I started working at Young People's Theater, and our friend Jeanette Moore and I, we started developing and creating theater together. And so then the three of us, Adam Siebold, my husband, Jeanette Moore, and myself, we created the Quickening Theatre. And in that time, we just used like the Fringe Festival as a way of developing and workshopping stuff and getting it in front of audiences. And then we would apply for grants, and then we would produce independently. And we were, struggling like crazy, but Toronto was a different place, and you could make very little money and have a nice apartment and have a good lifestyle. And Adam was booking TV stuff, so he could like kind of manage where I was like teaching and producing. We could kind of make it work for a while. And so we would just write stuff, and we'd all take turns, like who's directing, who's acting in it, and we'd all produce together. And for a time, it was awesome.
Love this.
That sounds
I'm
so much
so yeah, I'm so interested in this because I say this to like artist friends all the time. I'm like, we got to create an ensemble. We just got to put people together and make
And just do stuff. And we really loved it because we really had a strong community, and we were making stuff with people who we really believed in. And we really loved the work that we were creating.
And what was the vision? Like, how did you decide what, in terms of material, in terms of the types of productions you wanted to put forward? How would you guys collaborate? What was the vision of the theater company?
It really is not organized. Like there wasn't a clear, definable sort of mandate, because we really were trying to like support our three different brains, and we'd find where they'd intersect and we'd find where they would diverge. And so it was really more about like, well, what story do you want to write? I'm really excited about this book, or I have this news event that's inspiring me to write something, or like Jeanette was always very, very physical. And so she was always coming from like a movement based thing and wanting to create something that kind of came out of her like dance and movement background. So all of the work had some synergy, or crossover, but it was very like, this is Kate's, this is Jeanette's, this is Adam's, this is Kate's, this is Jeanette's.
Like playing to your strengths.
Yeah, and we would just support each other and make the things. And eventually we were pretty successful. Adam wanted Dora. His show got produced by Pasmarai in addition to like our own independent production. My play, Mr. Baxter, won a couple of awards, and we went from Fringe, and then Pasmarai was a big supporter of us. So then they took us on as a residency, and we produced that show again. And Jeanette's Fish Face went to like a bunch of different festivals, and then Vancouver Culture brought us, and we spent a month there developing it and producing it there. And so all of us were sort of starting to get some consistent acknowledgement and from the arts councils and from the theater companies. But we were having babies, I mean, I'm gonna tell you this story. It's so crazy, but because having babies is very painful and difficult and not always a straight line.
Yeah.
But we were working on my play in Toronto and developing and producing Adam's play to take to Vancouver. And Jeanette was about to have a baby, and I got pregnant in the middle of those two. So we were pregnant doing my play, and then we lost the baby doing his play 3 days before we had to fly to Vancouver. So then the two of us went to Vancouver and we did this show together, just like broken. And then that piece was invited to a conference like 6 months later. And we got pregnant again while we were doing the conference. And then that summer, we were at Passe Muraille producing my show. But my show had a whole storyline of losing a baby. So I could no longer play the role because I was like 7 months pregnant. So Jeanette, who was now like breastfeeding her like 8-month-old, played the role, and we like, played with it in a completely different way because now it was embodied by a different actor.
Sure. Yeah.
And then we had our son and had our independent production, because of course the cycle to like get your grants and produce your play, it's like a year and a half to 2 years. So we already had this show scheduled in February to do at Passe Muraille. So we were like 8 weeks baby breastfeeding, like
my
bouncing on the
goodness.
ball, rehearsing. And then we would do this production, and it was a two-hander. I played 9 different roles, and like imagine trying to memorize my lines was like so insane. I would like pump in the bag. I was on stage the whole time.
And then so who had the baby? So then was Adam?
No, Adam was on stage with me. Like it was the two of us performing our babies, like with
like,
random
passing.
people.
Past the baby.
Past the baby.
True, it takes a village.
It's so crazy. Thank God he won an award for that, because I thought, like, I don't even know where I am. And then when that was over, I went to Stratford to direct a show with Babe in Arms. So he was like home writing a script, and I was like, just in the rehearsal hall with the baby. And then that summer, we had another show of Jeanette's, which went through like a Fringe cycle, and then it won Best of Fringe. So it had like 3 different iterations of it. And she was now pregnant with her second child. And I just had Henry like strapped to me the whole time that we were doing this. And it was crazy. And then, sort of at the end of that run, our board of directors, we had an accountant on our board who sat me down, and he was like, you need to make like way more money. So you need to rethink what you're doing. And I was like, I'm a little bit burnt out. So I kind of maybe don't want to do this anymore.
Right. Oh,
But
well, that's a lot. And you made it.
I
Wow.
wouldn't recommend it, but I feel good about having accomplished it.
Yeah, it's amazing that you were able to wear so many hats all at the same time. But also, theater too it does require, I mean, it depends on what your role is. Like, actor, you're are long hours on set and whatnot. But theater, the schedule is a bit nutty too for families, actors and families. It's rehearsals and then the evening shows, and you have your matinees and all that. So I can imagine it must have taken its toll. I do want to touch also on another production, The Journey, which was like a large scale musical production that you were co-writer and director for. Can you share a little bit about that? Because that's pretty impressive. You guys raised a ton of money, like a ton.
That is a corporate project. That was really interesting. And I think, ushered me into the film industry in a way. Because Mitchell Cohen, who's a really fascinating person. He was the president of Daniels Corporation. I mean, he's like technically retired now, but he ran, this massive real estate conglomerate. But he is a musician, and he they took on Regent Park and worked through this humongous process of the sort of revitalization of that neighborhood. And it took a lot of consultation with, families and the community who were there for years, decades, and trying to really understand like what are the challenges in this neighborhood outside of just like the physical geography of it, but also what are the systemic problems and challenges that this community is dealing with, and how can transforming the space and then the sort of what does the city need to do, and who do we need to bring in to try and shift it so that the quality of life is better, and there are resources that have just never been available to the thousands of people who live here. So that was the goal. And through that process, he started doing these fundraisers that were sort of like concerts. So he had hired a band who he'd been making music with for like 35 years. And
Yeah.
and then he had, incredible friends like Jackie Richardson, and a ton of people at Alina Bridgewater. And so like these voices who would come in and sing these songs that he was writing, and he was writing sort of like this sort of poetic expression of what he was witnessing, and trying to elicit some kind of change in the neighborhood, which was, tremendously controversial, but a lot of people were celebratory of it. And so there was this, conflict of like, how do we do this in a respectful way? And I was brought on at one point as kind of like a production coordinator manager to try and like help produce this thing. And then while we were working on it, I was like, this is, you have 12 songs. Like, this is a musical. Why aren't we turning it into a play? And they always wanted it to be sort of a living, breathing evolution. And they wanted there to be a component where the youth of the neighborhood, specifically like the artistic talented kids, because there are a ton of them, many like rap artists, musicians, singers, poets, actors, like a ton of people have come out of there. And so they wanted to, encourage that. And so then I started to run this like training program that was like a 3-week program where we would incorporate choreography and writing and performance. So we would kind of come up with these like mini plays that the kids would totally generate themselves. And our choreographers would work with designing sort of the movement that would go with the music that Mitchell had written, but then the stories would be written by the kids. And then that kind of started this like training thing that we did every year. And from that, we would pull kids who then could be in the next like iteration of the show. And it kept evolving. So each year, a new kind of focus would be the base of the story. I think I did 3 productions. I don't know that we were ever like truly the voice of the community. So that became a real conversation of like, you're writing these songs, but these songs are reflective of your perspective, not the perspectives of the people who are here. And there were some like incredibly talented people that some of the songs, like we did a documentary because this documentarian knew this was happening and he wanted to come and capture this process. And there were these like unbelievable songs that some of these kids could write and perform that were so moving that I think if it made sense, it could have moved in a direction where it became much more originated from within. But it's so politically complicated. Like, who is getting the money? Where is the money coming from? What is the relationship to that work? And how are you, when you have to generate millions, you've got to, like, I think we ended up with like $4 million over the course of several years. Those are deep, deep, deep relationships, and trying to elevate it to a place that could compete like that, where that could like instigate that kind of donor investment became very complicated. And some point there was interest in trying to find a way to develop it further with Soul Pepper. But by that point, I had moved on because then I was making Band Ladies, my own shit.
Well,
Perfect
that's a
segue.
perfect segue. Let's talk about Band Ladies. I mean, I wish I had written this line down, but it was like you were talking to your husband in bed, and he was like, "What do you want?" And you're like, "I don't know." And you're like, "I've lost myself somewhere between the soccer field and the parking lot."
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Oh my God."
Yeah.
I feel like, I mean, Monica and I have both talked about that, how we just didn't even know what we wanted anymore
Yeah.
after having kids and becoming a mom and all of this stuff. So, yeah, tell us more.
Well, I guess as soon as I had this like sit down with the accountant who was like, you need to make a bajillion dollars more than writing. This is not a viable career. Then I very quickly like shifted gears and started just mainly auditioning for commercials. And I was just like, I don't even care what I do. I just want to pay my bills. And then the more that Jessica and I talked through it, she was like, you have to make stuff and you make stuff all the time. So like, you just need to transfer those skills and start making stuff here
Right.
in this
So,
capacity.
sorry, I just wanted to back up just a little bit. So, you had gotten signed on with Jessica, your agent, who's also my agent, sort of right away, like when you started transitioning.
Well, and I went to those acting interviews going like, I just want to do voiceover and commercial. Like, I know I haven't been a film actor. Like, it's fine. It doesn't matter. And I really thought I was just going to do voiceover. And I spent a bunch of time with Ellie Ray Hennessy. I don't know if you know her. And developed my demos and was just like, I'll just do voiceover. No one needs to see my face. It's fine. And Jessica was like, you're crazy. You should just be acting. So then I just started to see where it went. And it was kind of bonkers. Like, I think I needed the universe to like give me a push because I just booked everything. Like right out of the gate, I was like working constantly and to a point that was just ridiculous. And it must have just been like, my age, my experience, and what was on camera in that space just matched. And, it's hard to find like strong non-union actors. They exist, but it's not as easy. So I think I just showed up and people were like, oh, get Kate to do it. So then I was working a lot and thought, this is completely different than what I imagined this to be. So I had a new level of confidence. And also I already had like all kinds of source of income. Like I was working and I was busy. So I didn't have that sort of desperation that most of us eventually feel, where we're like, if I don't get this, I actually can't pay my rent. So can you please pay me?
We've all been there.
It's a great place to be while you're shooting an audition.
Yeah.
Really sells it. Really sells it.
But it's right behind the eyes. Like, please make this happen. So yeah, so there was like a confluence of things. So that was working in my favor and it gave me a lot of like confidence and energy. And I was writing, like I had always been writing. And so when we first had Henry, at some point we had this relationship with Jason Fraser. He used to run an acting studio and
Oh yeah.
I'd like a Meisner studio.
Meisner.
Yeah, we kind of did like a trade with him. So Adam and I would do a couple days a week covering some admin and the reception desk in exchange for space and time, which was common in the theater community. You try everything you could to get like studio space for cheap. So we would kind of tag team and one of us would go and do that. And while we were there, we would have like, closed off time where you could just be at the computer writing without having to be a parent for 6 hours or something. And then we'd trade. So he was getting lots done and I was writing a show about being a mom that really I had shaped around my mother because my mom, over the course of my life had been a single mom and had multiple marriages and kids with multiple people. And I was trying to sort of like unpack what that was and sort of the chaos of living in these like multi blended families. And so I tried really hard to get an IPF and I did a teaser and Annie Bradley, who's, one of my heroes, she directed it and was a great mentor. And I didn't get the money, but I had a relationship with Frantic Films, Graham Ludlow. He was running Frantic at the time, and he really liked the pitch. And so he was helping me, and he would just like read my scripts and give me notes and really tried to like shape and develop the piece and prepare it for this application. And even though we weren't successful, that was like a huge gift. And the NSI was really kind because I submitted for something there, and they became, big supporters of me over the course of several years, and gave me tons of feedback and stuff. And so that kind of got me into this, like, okay, I can make a web series. Maybe I didn't get funded for this one, but like, what's the next one? And I wanted my jokes per minute to increase. There's not enough time, but at a certain point, I had gone to Humber and I did the comedy program, and I was doing stand up and sketch and whatever. So I had been in like the improv world, and now seemed like the right time to go back to Second City. And so then I did all the conservatory and the long form and was just trying to get better at writing jokes. And I met Molly Sled and Dana Petticone, who became like my closest collaborators. And while we were there, we made a sketch about menopause and about our periods. And it was like a rock band that was like singing this song about our periods. And we were like, there's something about this that we need to do more of. What is it? And we just had this like sticky note on a board that just said band ladies. And like every couple of weeks we'd be like, what is that? And what do we want to do with it? And like, how could we make a show out of it? And eventually Dana and I were like, we know what it is. It's these women in their 40s and they turned their book club into a punk band. And once we had like kind of consolidated that premise, then all these ideas came. And Molly was in a band for like a decade. And Dana had worked at the Rivoli for a million years and had been surrounded by comedians and musicians forever. And it was just this crazy world that made sense to us. And like when I was a teenager, I dated a guy who was in a band for like 6 years. And as a 16-year-old, I would have to like show up while they were prepping because otherwise I wasn't legally allowed to be in the bar. So I just like spent hours hanging out as like a band-aid.
Right, and just seeing all the shit that goes on before and
Yeah, and all the inner fights, like they all imploded and hated each other, and their wives were pissed off at them, and like all the stuff. And so we were like, what if it's us and we're, angry? Um, so that's yes.
And if we're angry,
And if we're
I love
angry,
that.
which seems to be a permanent state of
Yes. Was it challenging, Kate? Because he wears so many hats. Like you're writing, you're producing, and you're acting in the project. What is the challenge of taking on all those roles at the same time? Like, are you able to separate the hats ever? Like when you're doing the acting, are you able to just focus on the acting, or is your producer mind still tagging along for the ride?
It's interesting because if I had a choice, that's all I would do. I would do all of the things back to the 10-year-old. So I think it's more challenging for other people because I think I drive everyone crazy who I work with because I am I'm a freak and very controlling, but not because I don't collaborate, but because I have like super uber high expectations, which sometimes are not achievable, but there's a deep like determination to achieve something that's great. So that can be difficult for sure. But I don't think so because we spent so much time writing, and I don't know what it would be like if I was able to do this like on a larger scale because the pressure is so different and the timelines are different. When you're making your own web series and you have control over like the when, you can kind of compartmentalize a little bit differently. So we spent so much time, and we still are, like we've reiterated on this show a bunch of times because we pitched it as a pilot. And so it's been, and we've considered it as a film. Like we've interrogated it so much that Dana and I are like, we can step into any one of these characters' brains and we can be in any situation because we know these women so completely. So when we were actually doing the show, I actually had way more confidence because I was like, the thing that I know I absolutely don't need to think about is the acting because I know this so well and I don't need to feel insecure about like whether I know my lines or anything. Like I've written them. I know them. And that usually is the part that is more challenging for me as an actor, is having that kind of confidence that I know it in my soul. And I think that's partly because I come from theater. So you get such a privilege to spend so much time rehearsing and playing and iterating on a person. And in film and TV, you get a couple sides, you put it on tape, or if you're lucky, you get to be in a room and play with it a little bit with another human being. And then boom, you're on set and you have to do it. And you have no information and you don't know anything about anything. And you have to invent it all. There's no rehearsal. No one gives a shit about you. You're going to fuck up the whole day if you don't know where to stand or where the camera is. And so, like, the level of pressure is so different. I'll just keep name dropping. Meredith McNeil, who I used to know, I don't know her anymore, but I've obviously followed her career. But she was in England at the same time as I was. And we knew each other sort of as teenagers. And she would say, like, you got to like roll around the room and like, say all your lines against the wall and do all of these things so that doesn't matter what position you're in, doesn't matter who's talking to you, it doesn't matter where you are in the world, like you know exactly what you're supposed to say. And then wherever you're at, it's like there. And if I was better, then I would force myself to do that kind of stuff more because I think I actually need it, and then it's funny working on the other side of things when you're directing, where you're producing and you're dealing with actors who are in so many ways, like they're the last people in and they're the first people to go. They're so disconnected from the project, but they sell the thing, or and they're so integral because if they can't deliver, you don't have a thing. So it's a very bizarre relationship. And it's hard to understand if you've never been in the shoes of an actor, because it is an insane place to put yourself, and every person needs to prepare themselves in different ways that from the outside, like the animals in the park, like everyone's looking at you like, this is not normal. But you kind of have to be okay with doing that. And you also have to be like an advocate of like, I'm going to need 15 minutes before we do this scene because I need to like go roll around in my trailer. Or if you work on the movies I do, no one has a trailer. So I need like a private closet where I can moan for a few minutes before I come out to do it, and you're like, okay. But
You have to be really comfortable with just being weird.
what your needs are and understanding what they are, and then being able to be like, this is what I need. It might sound crazy to you, but this is what's required. Otherwise, I can't do what it is that you need from me.
That, Kate, have you found, because you've done director, writer, producer, has one job helped inform another? Like, have you been able to see, as a director, I can work with actors in a way that if I wasn't an actor, you know what I mean? How those kind of help feed each other. Same for producers, or any way that the other positions have helped you in those roles?
Yeah,
As a
absolutely.
producer? Yeah.
I think it's really important. I hope, like, I don't know what other people would say, but my goal as a creative producer is to be able to understand, like, I line produced and worked with crew and production managed as well, which is not uh, a very creative role, but is so important for the creative, because if you don't understand why we're doing what we're doing, you can't help facilitate how we're going to do what we need. So I think it's really important to understand that concept. And it's hard to work with production teams that don't have a creative understanding of like, we're all here because we want to make this thing. And it might seem like a waste of time or crazy to you, but it's like, it's important that we get the shot. The shot is why we're here. And so we can't achieve what we're trying to get if you don't facilitate how we get it. And if you don't understand why we're getting it, how can you possibly facilitate the how? And that is important. And in my work now, really what I'm doing is like trying to help support the directors to have a vision of what they want to achieve, and make sure that the AD has all the information they need to be able to, schedule what has to happen, that the DP has everything that they need equipment wise to make sure that they can execute what the director wants. But then I have additionally the network or our EPs who have expectations of what we get and sort of maintaining the creative intent so that the vision of the director doesn't veer away from what's mandatory because there's network interest or somebody has signed off on a particular concept and we can't veer too far away from that. And then on top of that, to make sure that, the art team knows what's happening and knows when we have to pivot so that they can be prepared and they're ready and they're there. And that goes for all the other departments. And so you're like the, I don't know, the coach inside of it all, kind of making sure that everybody's where they need to be. It's basically like being a mom. That's my job.
Right. Yeah.
And then, somebody has a meltdown and you're like,
Yeah.
I hear what's happening.
Yeah.
Tell me what your ask is. Yeah, shield your emotions. What do we need to do to change it?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
so I think
Up and
so.
down. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that the more people like me have a holistic understanding, the better it is for all of the pieces. Because if you don't know what it's like to be an actor, or you don't know what it's like to be a director, or you don't know what it's like to be a writer, or you don't know what it's like to be any of the crew members, like you don't have that understanding, so you can't speak their language. And the more you can sort of spend a day in everybody's shoes in a real way, the more helpful you can be or effective. I find directing more intimidating, like that I feel like I should be doing, but I'm afraid to do. And I feel way more comfortable in the kind of facilitating than like fully taking the creative reins, not in terms of like working with actors, but more in the responsibility of like bringing the script to screen. That part is much harder. Like I really loved making fan ladies because I didn't have to do that part. I could be like, I'm writing it and I'm performing it and then I'm arguing with our director, but I don't have the responsibility.
You've got your opinions.
I have my opinions, but I don't actually have to be as accountable for what I choose. And that, I think that's like where at some point I'd love to step into that role, but I am very aware of like my fear around it.
So, are there plans to maybe do something else with band ladies coming up?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. We need someone to actually, there's always interest, but there's no one who's like, and now we're going to do it and here's the money. So that really is how do we get it?
Right.
But I also want to make other stuff. Like I have a screenplay that I'd love to produce, and there are other shows. Like Dana and I are writing more stuff together, and so it's not the only thing. I do love it, and I do feel like it's still very
relevant still. Yes, absolutely.
and it's really like there's so few shows and stories that articulate that stuff in there. Perimenopause is no joke. Menopause is crazy. Like we're all suffering, and only now is the world even remotely
Talking about it. Yeah.
acknowledging it. Yeah.
And they're only acknowledging it. Like the doctors still don't know what the hell they're doing. And everything is an experiment. Like if you're doing HRT, it's still like, well, we only have anecdotal information. So it's really up to you. You can experiment with this and then you can tell us what you think. You're like, okay, great. So I feel like less of a crazy person. I'm not really sure. Every day,
the responsibility is still on
still
me
mine.
to.
I'm supposed to like educate myself in a whole aspect of medicine where I'm from the arts. I don't have science as it's right up my forte.
Yeah.
It's crazy to me. And I think there's a lot of women who would be like, yes, I am angry all the time.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's why I asked because it just seems so relevant. Like when it came out 2020, I feel like if it came out now,
it would
like
hit right now is the time. I agree.
Yeah. Yeah.
And thankfully, I'm not the oldest either, right? Like, it's so funny in our group of friends, they'd be like, wow, it just feels like it's really aggressive. And I'm like, well, I give you 3 more years and then you will join me. Like, it's just like,
You will feel the same.
you will feel the same and you will not think that I am so angry because you will relate to rage.
Yeah. So I wanted to segue a little bit to Juliet and Romeo, something that you have just I mean, this love story, this young love story
Makes me feel perimenopausal. So let's
makes me
dive in.
get how that ever
Right.
happened.
How did that ever happen? I mean,
How
yeah. Well, we did have similar success with Band Ladies, even though unfortunately it happened right in the middle of a pandemic. So we could never openly be anywhere doing any of the things. Like I finally got to a place where I was like, oh, we're nominated for an ACTRA award, we're nominated for CSAs, and we can't go to any of these parties, we can't network, we can barely even wear a dress. And we had to do like all this online stuff that was so, sad and depressing. Truly,
Yeah.
you work so hard. It's not just for validation, but definitely you want the party to celebrate
Enjoy the
how
fruits of your labor.
hard it was and how
Yeah.
tremendous.
so rare.
Yeah. So we didn't
So
get to do
rare.
any of those things. Thankfully, we had all those accolades, and Jessica specifically got really excited about it. And then Tim Bogart being the director and writer of Juliet and Romeo and producer, he spent a year in the same way that Graham Ludlow did, but much, much more deeper commitment to us. Like he worked with Dana and I on developing this pilot and really had a like love and understanding of like what the content was and what we were trying to do. So they were ready to sort of like take it out to the market and shop it, but they went to Cannes with Spinning Gold, and all of a sudden I got this call from Jessica from Rome, and she was like, we're in Italy and things are moving very quickly and you need to be here.
Wow.
Like, what are you talking about? So that became, this really amazing, well, I don't know, like boot camp for me because it elevated what I was doing on a really small scale into this like massive universe because I was supporting everything that Tim was doing, like watching all of the casting and helping, you know, read with different actors and going through that whole process of trying to like determine who the leads of this movie were going to be and then landing in Rome and trying to, without a word of Italian, trying to sort of figure out like what's happening on the production side and how do we stay in communication between the creative and the production. And it's so hard when you do co-pros because you're working with a group that is based out of this country and then you've got your team and you're trying to like collaborate and bring those two together, which is just difficult because we spoke a completely different language in a completely different way. Like I would even get comments on my emails like here in Italy we speak very, I don't know, much more florally, I guess. Like, hi, how are you doing? I hope that the sun is shining and you're feeling good in your life. And I would like you, please, to send me the production schedule because that's where I have 4 times, but I haven't received it. And, the American style is like, I have 750 emails that I need to answer every day. So, like,
Right.
I'm direct and just gives me the thing. And us Canadians were kind of somewhere in between. But I was very like, I literally open my computer and I have 200 emails that I need to respond to. So I need to be like really clear and really direct about what they are. And like, I don't know who's feeling what on any given day. But that was, people would be offended and struck by how you communicated. So there was like a whole cultural thing that we had to understand and learn.
Right, and navigate that.
Yeah, and then it was a massive movie. So we had horseback riding and we had stunts and fights and we had choreography and we had studio sessions to record the songs. And
Yeah, music.
yeah, so all of these casts had to come and be in Italy for a month, like rotating through all these things. So I had to coordinate all of the rehearsals because we didn't have like an AD team on for prep. Like our ADs were developing the production schedules for production. So that was sort of like a separate thing that myself and I did kind of on my own initially. And then another producer who was Bradley Bogart, Tim has worked with a million times, one of his brothers, came out and kind of helped on the global level. Like once we started pushing to production, how are all these pieces? He really was like what I do now at Vortex. He was the guy making sure that like the art department knew what was happening and was prepared for where we were going, and that all of these pieces, plus the whole sort of financial responsibility.
So were you with Vortex first? Like, have you been working?
No.
Okay, so you did
No.
the Juliet and Romeo, and now you are with Vortex.
Yeah, I was working occasionally with Cream. I worked on a bunch of different independent movies before I did any of that stuff, but I was like, developing those skills along the way and knowing that I wanted to show run and make my own show. It's like this was a perfect opportunity to increase and advance those skills on a really significant level. Like even here in Canada, it's rare that we would make a production of that size. Like the, jibs and techno cranes and all the things that we worked with. We like, if we can get a jib for a day, if we can get like a steady cam, these are big
Yeah,
acts at our level.
I mean, it's a beautiful movie. I was lucky enough to see the screener, so no spoilers, but it's cinematically just
Beautiful.
beautiful. The coloring's beautiful. All of the actors are just the dancing, the singing, everything. It is really it's like it's magical.
Hmm. I know it was so crazy that we were just in castles
Right. And
in the middle of
as,
Italy.
as like an audience member, you're watching and you're just like, whoa, like it looks so cool. But then, for a minute, you put your actor hat on or, and you're like, this would have been
Oh yeah, I'm sure. I mean, I think the actors had a great time because most of them, like the core ensemble, were there the whole time, and so they were living in these like amazing apartments and
Yeah.
hotels and like just all over because we shot in different parts of Parma in the northern part of Italy, and we shot in Rome, and all of our rehearsals were in Rome, so they were all in Rome for like 4 weeks, and we were just in like these incredible places. But they were definitely working like insane hours. Everybody wants the schedule to make sense and be consistent, and it never is. Like every day, you're like, so we thought this was what our plan was, but instead, this is what we're doing. And then we had, after the Christmas break, we had a COVID outbreak, and we literally had to shoot fight scenes like in half. Like we're doing this side with our actor and the stunt performer. And then like 3 days later, when we can get the other actor back, we're going to do this side. And so trying to make that happen was crazy.
It's wild.
Most of the time, like especially in the Vortex context, but even in some of the other films and indie films that I worked on, like we're lucky if we get 2 cameras. It's a big deal if you get a second camera. There's no way you have a second unit. And when we were working on this thing, like there were days when it was just like, we won't make this movie if we don't have 3 units. So there were like 3 units set up. And Quinn, who's Tim's daughter, she was the second unit director. So she sort of like had one section that she was running. And then he was kind of simultaneously doing the other 2. So he would be here at the main unit, and then he'd run over, double check with what we were doing at the second unit. And then he would run over, double check what was happening at the third unit, and then move. And like, or he'd like set this up. It'd be done as they were resetting or repositioning lights. He'd go over here, shoot this one. And Byron, our GP, he was like all over it. So it's pretty miraculous. I worked like 21 hours a day and
oh my God.
for like 3 hours.
Oh my God.
It's crazy.
On that note, we are reaching our hours.
Oh yeah, I haven't
A couple more questions. Okay, great. So we'll close it up because our podcast essentially focuses on women who are pursuing their passions while also juggling life's responsibilities.
Yes.
How do you, Kate, manage to juggle it all? What's your strategy, your approach? I mean, do you have any advice for aspiring artists out there who are trying to do all the things as well, or any advice you've ever received from a mentor?
Oh God. advice from a mentor. I mean, I've had so many mentors, so I do believe in mentorship, and I do work with WIFT and mentor people through the WIFT Connects program, and that was tremendously helpful to me. So I do think having those kinds of resources. I went to the National Screen Institute, and through that also had a component of my program was mentorship, and having those. I don't know that they were always women, but for me they were always women. Like Tara Woodbury was my mentor at NSI, and Susan Alexander was my mentor at WIST. Two pretty well established and incredible women in our industry, and both with significant families. So I do think it helps to see that it's possible. I think it's really important to always like check in with yourself and know what you want to do at any given time, and not feel like what you choose to do is the determining factor forever. Like if you feel like you need a break, then take a break. If you feel like you're, ambitious in this moment and you want to hit the ground hard, go for it. But I think having like compassion for all the stages that we go through physically as women and all the stages we go through as parents, I think, there's a chunk of time, depending on where it falls in your sort of age. There's some difficult things that we as human beings, but specifically as women, have to navigate. But also, my husband is not like his life is easier, although it is, because he doesn't have to be a birth and he doesn't have menopause. But as any artist, you're constantly like, am I doing this properly? Am I doing everything that I could? Do people even give a shit about what I'm creating? Am I ever going to make enough money to pay my bills? Those things, like, we're always up against all of those questions. And sometimes you're successful in the moment where all those things are working and you don't have to worry about them. And other times, most of the time, some of them are working and many of them are not working. And I think the only way to survive is compassion, which I would say, like, I'm saying that, but I need to take that advice for myself, because I want to be more successful all the time in every way. I want my son to be taken care of. I want my marriage to be intact in a way that is great. And I want my career to be as successful as it can. And I want all my bills to be paid. And I want to go on vacation. Like, I want all the things.
Yeah, I want to work on all the time, but I also want my vacation.
Yeah. And I want to be present, but like, I don't know.
Yeah. It's interesting. I was going to ask you our final question, which we ask all our guests, but you kind of answered it. But if you have anything to add, I'll give you the question either way. When you hear the phrase hitting her mark, what does that mean for you? And how do you define success in your life? It could be personally or professionally.
Yeah, to me, it means like you land where you're supposed to be. And so where that is in the context of shooting is very specific and has very specific parameters. Inside of your life, whether it's personal or creative, those parameters feel a little bit different, but kind of reconnecting with yourself and being like, am I where I am supposed to be? Am I getting what I need? Whether it's like a process that I'm finding new skills that I'm going to use in the future, or if I'm using the skills that I just previously developed, like, where do I feel like I am in my, not like the fantasy of where I thought I would be by now, but what do I think I'm where I need to be? And if I don't, then what do I need to do to change that? I think is how I understand that statement.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Kate, thank you
It
so
was-
much. This has been awesome. There's so much that we didn't even
There's
touch
so
on.
much. Yeah,
You're
there's
amazing.
so many things that that I was just like looking at the time, and I was just like, we got to get some more stuff. But we could talk to you forever.
Yeah, it was fun. It's nice to talk about.
Yeah, it's really cool to see. You're like a true multi-hyphenate. It's amazing to see all of the different roles that you do, and just thank you so much for joining us. I think the listeners will get a lot out of it, and I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thanks for thinking of me.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to Hitting Her Mark. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. For more content and updates, follow us on Instagram at Hitting Her Mark.